In a universe on the brink, seasoned diplomat Scott Wright encounters Alar, a fierce alien emissary, during a mission to save Earth. Their bond offers a fragile hope for peace amidst brewing conflict. Can they overcome deep-seated mistrust to unify their worlds before a sinister threat strikes? In the quest for survival, moral lines will blur and choices will haunt. If you want to dive into real stories of parallel realities every day, in enigmatic, technological worlds that are completely different from our planet, subscribe to our channel and leave your like. Well, let's go. In the midst of an expansive and bustling spaceport located on the fringes of the known galaxy, a moment of cosmic significance unfolded in the crowded concourse, littered with travelers from distant worlds. Flickering neon lights illuminated the myriad of alien faces, each a testament to the vast diversity of life that inhabited the stars. Merchants hawked their eclectic wares: iridescent fabrics from Thalav, mechanical curiosities from the tinkering races of Xantari, and spicy essences from the lush jungles of Varanthea. The air thrummed with the energy of 1,000 untold stories, each waiting to be embarked upon. At the center of this vibrant scene stood Scott Wright, a seasoned diplomat with tousled dark hair that framed his determined face. His azure eyes, filled with a blend of hope and trepidation, surveyed the throng. Clad in a crisp, navy blue uniform adorned with the emblem of Earth's United Federation, he carried the heavy weight of his responsibility on his shoulders. Earth had called upon him to negotiate with the powerful Oka race, an ancient species smartly clad in sleek, shimmering armor that reflected their advanced technologies. The atmosphere shifted palpably when Scott found himself in the same command bay as Alar, the Oka's formidable negotiator. Standing there, Alar towered over him, her ethereal presence creating an aura of intimidation that was hard to ignore. Her skin, a deep shade of obsidian blue marked by bioluminescent patterns that surged with her emotions, glimmered under the artificial lights. Alar's striking golden eyes, sharp and unyielding, conveyed a world of experience forged in the crucible of conflict. With a proud and regal demeanor, she embodied the fierce protector of her people, an unwavering guardian of the Oka's traditions, culture, and honor. As their eyes met across the distance, Scott's heart raced. Memories haunted him: the devastating collisions of warships, the screams of civilians caught in the crossfire of alien invasions that had flattened cities on Earth. Yet, amidst the daunting shadows of the past, there flickered a glimmer of hope within him. Here, in this critical juncture of fate, he felt an uncharacteristic connection with Alar, a privilege of understanding that transcended the barriers of species and history. Was it possible? Could they forge an alliance rooted in trust when trust had been shattered repeatedly in the cosmos? The moment crystallized, a fragile bead of potential hanging suspended in the chaos surrounding them, as the underlying tension reflected the long history of mistrust between the Oka and humans. Whispers of unease rippled through Alar's entourage, her warriors marked with the signs of unease and ancestral skepticism. They watched the scene unfold, their hands resting on weapons sleek and deadly. To them, Scott was an interloper, a representative of a species that had often demonstrated a propensity for aggression and domination. Breaking the silence, the ancient Oka tradition called it the contact that, against a tapestry of conflict, could spell either salvation or doom. Neither Scott nor Alar could ignore the weight of their task, nor the multitude of lives entwined in the fragile course of their actions. Would the oath of diplomatic accord break the shackles of their turbulent history? Time was short, and unknown outside forces were encroaching with a malicious intent that could endanger both of their civilizations. Alar's stern countenance revealed something deeper, a flicker of vulnerability, perhaps, a yearning for change amidst the encroaching chaos. The psychological scars run deep within her, shadows of losses suffered in battles long past sweeping through her thoughts. Each encounter whispered of buried pain, of reverence for tradition and duty, yet a calling for progress and unity resounded within her heart. Could she, an Oka warrior, embrace a human in collaboration? Could the future really hinge on such an improbable bond? Contemplation surrounded them as they stood in the command bay, punctuated only by the distant hum of spacecraft engines and the rhythmic pulse of thrusters igniting against the backdrop of the galaxy. The spaceport floor trembled with the anticipation of gatherings, the infinite potential that connected the stars. Every being in that spaceport sensed the fragility of the moment, and yet, hope interwove with despair as uncertainty loomed. As they began the exchange of customs and languages, Scott tried, through gestures, to convey not just the urgency of his mission, but the desire for partnership that felt instinctual to him. He recalled the tales he had heard, the Oka's proud heritage interlaced with reverence for nature and celestial events. A race of beings who formulated alliances not through coercion but with respect for mutual strength. Alar, intrigued yet guarded, engaged in the unspoken dance of values and convictions. Yet, skepticism remained a potent adversary. Shadows behind Alar shifted as the ice in their negotiations cracked under the weight of echoing histories, of battles fought, of betrayals revisited. The whispers of the Oka warriors wove a narrative steeped in resentment, an emotional tapestry leaving scars that time had failed to heal. Would Alar, burdened by the expectations of a lineage steeped in ancestral loyalty, fall prey to the allure of a darker nature? The tension thickened as the fabric of their dialogue began to unravel, balanced above an abyss of misunderstanding. Suddenly, a devastating commotion arose as a signal flared from the sensors at the perimeter of the port. Alar and Scott turned together toward the blaring alerts, their shared instinct igniting a moment of camaraderie as both of them grasped the gravity of the situation. The movement was swift, yet laden with dire consequences. The Xaianos, a notorious race known for their brutal tactics, were preparing to invade the very spaceport they occupied. Sensing the imminent danger and hostility, Scott's heart raced anew with the realization of what truly lay ahead, the prospect of not only forging an alliance but, more urgently, defending their survival against a rapid approaching foe. In the darkness beyond the stars, moths of violence hovered on the fringes, wholly unaware of the bond just beginning to form between Scott and Alar. Their connection, a mere flicker, faced the threat of extinguishment. The moment of unity had evolved into a call to arms, as disparate worlds converged with the common aim of survival. The looming shadows whispered tales older than them both, rippling with warnings and fears not easily dismissed. Alar gripped her weapon, her calculated resolve hardening. She could feel the embers of duty and heritage igniting within her, a catalyst born of obligation and loyalty. The whispers of her kin echoed in her mind, urging her to uphold the principles of her ancestors while simultaneously battling the rising tide of fear that threatened to erase unity. Meanwhile, Scott felt the daunting weight of responsibility, the foundations of Earth upon his shoulders. Trust, despair, hope, and necessity coalesced at the apex of their encounter. As Scott delved deeper into the customs and traditions of the Oka, the once vibrant colors of the alien landscape began to dim beneath the weight of growing mistrust. The towering crystalline structures that formed the Oka's capital shone with bioluminescent hues, illuminating the skies with an iridescent glow. But even their beauty could not drown out the whispers of doubt circulating among the Oka ranks. Scott found himself navigating the intricacies of Oka culture, each day becoming a complex dance of diplomacy laden with peril. The warriors, adorned in tribal tattoos that glistened against their ebony exoskeletons, gathered in solemn assemblies filled with ancient rituals, their eyes glinting with suspicion whenever he entered their midst. Alar, the formidable negotiator and Scott's reluctant ally, often stood by his side, yet her demeanor served as both a shield and a barrier. A continuous ebb and flow of warm and cold interactions characterized Scott's existence among the Oka. He watched as Alar oscillated between being a fierce protector of her people and a reluctant emissary of hope, her internal struggle mirroring the tensions flaring up within her society. There lay an undeniable camaraderie, however fraught with the reality of their struggle. Their attempts to bridge the chasm stretched thin, strangling the blossoming trust before it had a chance to flourish. General Kell, a massive figure distinguished by towering stature and a brooding presence, quickly emerged as Scott's most formidable opponent. His golden eyes burned with disdain as he scrutinized the human diplomat, perceiving Scott's entreaties for unity as a betrayal of Oka identity. The general's battle-hardened exterior and scarred countenance evoked respect among his peers. With a voice that could chill the solar winds, he decried Scott's proposals, framing them as a cowardly surrender to human weakness. Too many times, we have laid aside our own for the fading light of others. This will not be our legacy, Kell proclaimed, his words met with murmurs of approval from the assembled warriors. Scott, witnessing the intensity of their resolve, felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Every word Kell uttered echoed the haunting history of alien invasions that had ravaged both Oka and human worlds alike. He understood that dissolving the layers of suspicion would not happen overnight. It would require a monumental shift in perception and a mutual display of vulnerability. Alar frequented gatherings where Kell's zealous speeches grew more impassioned, her own conflict festering beneath her stoic facade. She would steal glances at Scott from across the chamber, her steadfast demeanor shifting to quiet contemplation. Each look sparked a longing to break the chains of historical enmity and fear. Yet the weight of her ancestors and the pride of her people pulled her back, urging caution. Determined, Scott sought deeper understanding, delving into ancient Oka texts and lore, where he uncovered nuances of their beliefs. He learned of their revered deities of unity, thought to protect their people from the chaos of discord. But among all the scrolls and inscriptions, a particular tale resonated. The legend of the shattered horizon, a prophecy surrounding a time of dire need, where fragile alliances would be tested, and only through steadfastness could redemption be attained. Jet-black sunrises cascaded into purples and oranges as Scott began to assert his own presence in the Oka stronghold. He stood alongside Alar as she defended the idea of unity before the council. The shadows of doubt continued to loom, but Scott's persistent determination began to permeate through the layers of skepticism binding them all. Every day spent together reinforced their understanding of one another. Scott's belief in hope sifted gently through a veil of fear encasing the Oka. The Oka responded to the threats of the Xaianos, whose reputation for devastating brutality loomed as an existential dread. Scott learned the horrifying tales of Xaiano legions, their cold tactics, their penchant for annihilation, and their disregard for life itself. The elders of the Oka spoke of the last Xaiano incursion, which left their world marred with ruins. Their ancestral spirits roamed restless, urging the Oka to remember and fear, while Kell fueled their terror with his rallying cries steeped in wrath. As skirmishes with the Xaianos intensified, Scott found himself under increasing pressure to unify the Oka. With each skirmish that escaped Nedsi's defenses, the Oka's morale dwindled. Kell's insidious influence began nurturing seeds of dissent among Alar's warriors, driving wedges deeper into their alliance with humanity. Amidst this turmoil, Scott and Alar devised a clandestine plan to infiltrate the Xaiano outpost. They gathered a select group of Oka warriors, balancing traditional weaponry with advanced human technology. The team comprised the boldest fighters, warriors whose loyalty stretched beyond the bleak horizon. They sought to disrupt the Xiono supply lines, hoping to buy their people precious time and demonstrate the efficacy of their alliance. As Alar trained alongside the Oka, her every movement chiseled into a beautiful choreography of grace and strength, Scott stood at the sidelines, feeling the heavy weight of suspicion permeating the air. He understood that winning trust required more than mere words. It demanded actions that could inspire loyalty and camaraderie. Each drill, filled with fierce energy, transformed moments of awkwardness into a cohesive dance of purpose. During one pivotal training session, Alar executed a flawless attack maneuver, her prowess leaving a noticeable impression on her squad. But Scott could sense the lingering doubt even within this display of unity. Through the rigors of battle drills, he sought ways to build bridges, stressing the importance of understanding one another as they faced this grave threat together. Imagine the strength we possess, side by side. We are not just two races. We are two worlds that could unite. Scott roared, igniting fervor amongst a hesitating group. A flicker of hope ignited, but kept in check by the glances exchanged, wary yet intrigued by the human spirit that burned for their shared salvation. The conflict deepened, and Kel's influence threatened to snuff out the embers of what could have been. In the walls of the Oka fortress, agitation simmered, while outside the resilient horizon bore witness to the inexorable approach of darkness. As the Xionos advanced, word of their nefarious capabilities swirled like a tempest, igniting fears that ran deep within Alar's people. But even as the threats burgeoned, Scott's resolve crystallized. He understood that courage had the power to challenge fear in its very core. In the depths of the encroaching shadows, he found a flicker of hope etched into existence. Outside, the storm clouds gathered, cloaking the skies in ashen gray, an ominous precursor to the chaos that loomed ahead. Tension suffused the air, an electric current tethered between the Oka and the fragile alliance they had struggled to forge. In a crucible of tension and uncertainty, Scott Wright and Alar stood at the forefront of their most audacious endeavor. The laboratory, a vast dome of reinforced transparent alloy, hummed with the vibrations of advanced technology, clashing beliefs, and unquenchable hope. Through the translucent walls, crimson and azure lights flickered as the Oka warriors engaged in their rigorous training just outside. Their movements were fluid and deadly, a stark contrast to the hesitation Scott felt deep within. This space had become their sanctuary, yet it was also a canvas painted with the strokes of doubt. As Scott studied the intricate schematics floating in midair, his mind raced with visions of peace. The protective force field could be their salvation, a medium for understanding and contact between humans and the Oka. Alar, situated across the chamber, adjusted the program's frequency, her deep indigo skin gleaming under the artificial lights. Despite the confidence she projected to her people, inside her raged a storm of conflict. Every spark of brilliance from Scott contrasted with the shadows of her past. The whispers of the Oka's history loomed large over their heads. Tales of betrayal and bloodshed during previous contact with outsiders echoed in the corridors of her mind. Alar's ancestors had faced incalculable losses when they reached out to foreign civilizations, and now, every inch closer she took to Scott felt like a betrayal to her kin. Remember, she stated, albeit cautiously, this unity we wish to foster must overcome the fears that divide us. Scott glanced up from the holographic display, his striking blue eyes locking with hers. His heart ached with understanding. I can feel the weight of your history, Alar. And I can assure you, that fear is not what I carry. The sincerity in his voice might have pierced through her hardened defenses, but doubt still clung to her. The endless hours of work brought them not only closer to their objective but also to one another. Scott often observed Alar's intricate rituals as she prepared to lead her warriors, each gesture imbued with meaning and purpose that transcended mere formality. Wisps of her silver hair danced in the technological breezes, framing her fierce expression, a portrait of commitment. The more he learned, the more he felt the weight of her duel with tradition, but he understood her struggle was not his to resolve. It was a battleground their people had to navigate together. General Kell, with his sharp features etched in stone and eyes that mirrored the cold void of space, made every effort to undermine their progress. A distinguished warrior of the Oka, he was as formidable as he was unyielding. His armor glinted under the lab's lights, a testament to his battle-worn experience. Kell exuded an authority that silenced the room whenever he entered, and his disapproval of Scott's presence reverberated like a chilling blast. Each pronouncement he made about the folly of collaboration diminished the fragile strings of trust that were slowly weaving themselves between Scott and Alar. Your interest in a pact with the humans leads us down a path we have walked before, Alar, Kell contended one afternoon, his voice low but ferocious. Our predecessors paid dearly for their misplaced trust, and I refuse to let your errors lead us into another catastrophe. Yet, despite Kell's fervent opposition, Alar's allegiance to Scott began to transcend her fears. A flicker of courage ignited within her, a substance very much alive when they worked side by side. They persevered through the countless failures of their experiments, a complex amalgamation of biological and technological innovation often resulted in chaotic surges and unintended meltdowns. But with each setback, the developing bond grew. Alar witnessed Scott's resilience and intelligence, qualities that challenged her understanding of what could be shared between their species. Underneath the framework of science, a mystery unfolded as they were drawn into one another's worlds. Scott would sometimes share stories from Earth, tales of innovation born from collaboration and unity against adversity. Alar would respond with riveting legends of the Oka warriors who had battled through unrelenting odds and triumphed against the darkness. They painted images, both strikingly beautiful and harrowingly complex, of their respective cultures, a tapestry more vibrant each day. Sparks were not merely flying from the machinery before them. A deeper chemistry brewed as they discovered common ground against the engulfing shadows. The fortifying wall of the protective field slowly took shape, an engineering marvel, a true testament to their combined intellect. Yet, every day brought Kell's resistance crashing down harder upon them. One fateful day, as they prepared for a critical test of their newly engineered shield, Scott felt the sensation of dread tighten the air. Alar's apprehension mirrored his own as they gathered the final components, knowing that the success of their experiment bore the weight of fate. As the machinery whirred to life, General Kell burst into the lab. His presence twisted the atmosphere, turning their sanctuary into a battlefield. Enough of this folly. You do not understand the ramifications of your actions. Alar braced herself, her heart pounding, a clash of emotions roiling within her. This is our chance, Kell. If we can prove that coexistence is possible, by embracing the very enemies who will exploit your weakness, he challenged, his voice a growl. You are leading your people toward oblivion. Ignoring Kell's accusations, Scott pressed a button, activating their prototype. The shimmering barrier enveloped the lab, a kaleidoscope of light flickering as it stabilized. Whispers of triumph filled the space, yet Scott was painfully aware of the undercurrent of tension. This shield can protect our worlds, allow us to understand one another safely. With eyes widening in disbelief, Kell stepped forward, rage radiating from him. This shield is a mere illusion. Today, our traditions stand as the true guardians of our legacy. Trust, once broken, can never be restored. The waves of energy from the force field pulsed with resonation, casting kaleidoscopic patterns against the walls of the lab, their beauty starkly contrasting the conflict brewing inside it. Alar felt torn, knowing that Kel's dangerous rhetoric could lead to a fracture that could ruin everything. Scott understood that while they had succeeded in their experiment, true success lay not in the technology alone but in winning over the skepticism that clung like a shroud. The stakes had never been higher. The Xaianos were advancing, their fleets navigating through the cosmos with malicious intent. With every day that passed, time became a relentless adversary, squeezing their hopes like a vice. Dread settled heavily in Scott's chest, overshadowed by visions of lost opportunities and lives extinguished too quickly. As the confrontation escalated, it became painfully evident that the clash would not be easily quelled. Kel's vehement defiance illuminated his dedication to tradition, yet Scott saw only the impending disaster. Despite the beauty of the Oka fortress, a palpable tension hung over the gathering as General Kel's hand gripped the podium tightly, the bones of his knuckles white against the dark metal surface. Each flicker of his gaze felt like a physical blow to Scott and Alar. The Oka had poured their trust into this moment. Warriors brimming with pride and resolve packed the chamber, atmosphere crackling with uncertainty. Was their hard-fought alliance only a fragile facade, ready to crumble under Kel's mounting pressure? Scott's heart thundered in his chest as he stood beside Alar, their shoulders nearly touching, a small but significant gesture of solidarity. Alar was a vivid embodiment of strength. Her sculpted armor seemed to glow defiantly in the harsh fluorescent light, enhancing the fierce contours of her face, sharp cheekbones, a determined jaw, and eyes like swirling galaxies. He admired the intensity with which she faced the crowd, grounding him amid the escalating tensions. Yet behind that steely resolve lay the burden of loyalty. The tumult of refusing to betray one's own people clashed with the promise of a future built on unity. "Kel, we stand at the brink of extinction," Scott called out, his voice echoing through the chamber. The air thickened with disbelief. He could feel the pulse of opposition radiating from the crowd, but he pressed on undeterred. The Xaianos do not discriminate. Their brutal campaign intends to eradicate anyone who stands in their path, be it Oka or human. Our strength lies in collaboration, not discord. Kel's scowl only deepened. "And you propose we lower our defenses? Hand over our warriors to a human? Your very kind has wrought havoc across galaxies. Why should we trust you?" His voice was filled with contempt, laced with echoes of a history that was not easily forgotten. A hush fell over the assembly. Alar drew a deep breath, and Scott felt the weight of her internal struggle. The crowd seemed to bloom with distrust, their faces a blur of anxious disbelief. "We have endured centuries of conflict," she projected, her voice resonant, cutting through the tension like a blade. "But in our darkest hour, we must not succumb to fear. The Xaianos attack, but they will be thwarted by our unity." The words echoed powerfully against hardened resistance, igniting flickers of conviction in some Oka hearts. Yet, Kel remained resolute, his doubts suffocating any likelihood of reconciliation. The humans' lofty ideals will turn to ashes in the fires of war. Will you let your fear blind you, Alar? Will you trade our legacy for a fleeting hope? With one fraught moment, Scott saw the flicker of doubt in Alar's eyes. They burned brightly, a storm of conflicting allegiances swirling within them. Would she really allow a singular voice to dictate the fate of their alliance? The atmosphere thickened with the air of impending conflict, a tempest brewing between tradition and the urgent need for evolution. And then, an explosion rocked the fortress, the very ground trembling beneath them. Alar instinctively raised her weapon, the swift motion revealing a fierce simplicity in her determination. Scott glimpsed the fear in the warriors' eyes as they turned, apprehensive of the future. Chaos erupted as the communication system blared alarms, reporting the approach of the Xiano fleet, bearing a menacing armada that blotted out distant stars. "To arms!" Kel shouted, that commanding authority finally channeling the hurry of Oka tradition. "Defend the fortress. We fight for our very existence." Alar's fierce gaze locked onto Scott's, whispered urgency vibrating between them. "We must tell them of our plan. There is no time to waste." And thus began a race against the ticking clock, as both Scott and Alar rushed through the labyrinthine corridors of the fortress. Distant sounds of distant explosions echoed through the stone walls while myriad Oka warriors prepared for battle. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through him, a deep-rooted desire to protect the fragile alliance against external forces. The weight of their mission pressed heavily on his shoulders as the echoes of history screamed, demanding a stand neither side could afford to abandon. At the command ship, Scott's mind raced with calculations and possibilities. He turned to Alar, urgency radiating from her presence, the fierce warrior now lightened by the determination that burned in her gaze. "If we can demonstrate our defense system to the Oka forces, show them its efficacy, then perhaps they will see the merit of our collaboration." "Then we need a live demonstration," she replied, pushing aside her sword to reveal a holographic panel at her side that shimmered in response to her touch. "I can summon the aerial units. They'll display our latest developments as they intercept the Xianos." The idea sparked a spark of belief, a beacon amid uncertainty. Alar's fingers danced across the interface, channeling an energy pulsating with potential, and soon, arcs of luminous blue energy formed above them. It glimmered like the stars themselves, swirling and sparking with intention. But as they prepared for the demonstration, Scott couldn't shake the niggling doubts he faced silently. He hadn't been a soldier, he had been a diplomat, untested in the crucibles of warfare. The wonder of collaborative creation now faced an impending barrage, a gauntlet both of them must navigate. "Keep communicating with the fighters," Scott urged as the holographic display showcased the defense units, their configurations twisting into existence above the ship. "Every second counts. We must prove our worth before the Xianos penetrate the fortress." The Oka warriors, filled with resolve, moved swiftly into formation at Alar's command, their precision melding into a well-oiled machine as colors flickered above in bright displays of illumination. Scott felt an undercurrent of hope stirring between him and Alar, a tether that shone brighter amid the chaos erupting around them. As the Xiano ships streaked across the sky like dark comets, sirens blared, slicing through the heat of battle once more. The first explosions erupted outside the fortress, fiery trails illuminating lives caught in the crossfire, a cacophony of destruction morphing into fervent cries, urging Scott's heart to thunder louder. "Now," Alar shouted, her voice fierce against the chaos. The system locked onto the incoming foes. He could see them, the terrible visage of the Xiano vessels veiled in the dark cosmos, ruthlessly efficient as they plummeted towards the ground like arrows of death. The vibrant blue shield shimmered brightly, bursting forth from the fortress with an energy that felt alive, pulsing with potential. As they fired upon approaching invaders, a moment of exhilaration surged through Scott. Each collision released a dazzling explosion that breathed vibrant color into the dark vacuum of space, showcasing the triumphant result of their endeavor, of their fragile alliance forged through want and will. The cosmic twilight settled over the battlefield, where remnants of the recent conflict still lingered like faint echoes in the vastness of space. The skies above Nova Harmonia were awash with vibrant hues of orange and purple, the remnants of dying stars caught in the swirling nebulae, providing a stark contrast to the chaos that had erupted just days before. As the dust of war began to settle, the reality of their hard-won victory enveloped Scott and Alar. Together, they stood atop a ridge overlooking the newly established colony, their minds swirling with visions of what had been achieved and the road that lay ahead. In the aftermath of the battle against the Xaianos, the alliance forged among their people carried a collective weight of responsibility, a feeble glimmer of hope amidst the wreckage of mistrust. The warriors of the Oka and the human settlers had fought side by side, spilling blood in the name of a cause that now bound them together, but the road to unity would not be without its challenges. Each shared glance between Scott and Alar was charged with unspoken words, a lingering sense of camaraderie blossoming amid lingering cultural gaps. Nova Harmonia, Scott murmured, the name tumbling from his lips like a prayer. It encapsulated the very essence of their mission, a new beginning. This place held the promise of a diverse existence, where myriad species could coexist, thriving together and building bridges over the chasms of their respective histories. Yet, as they surveyed the horizon, they couldn't ignore the underlying tremors of dissent that rippled through the gathered factions. The settlers buzzed with excitement, their aspirations reflected in the glimmers of their makeshift lights. But within the Oka ranks, anxiety simmered just beneath the surface. General Kell's influence had not evaporated, his presence still cast a long shadow over the proceedings. Discontent simmered like an approaching storm, and Scott and Alar understood that winning the battle had merely scratched the surface of an even larger struggle for the hearts and minds of their people. Underneath the vibrant twilight, a series of assemblies unfolded, each faction wrestling to define its role in this brave new world. Town hall meetings buzzed with energy, star maps were adorned with ambitious routes for potential exploration councils, and plans for joint defense formations filled the air with buzzing discourse. Yet, the Oka arrayed themselves apart, their voices split between those who championed this coalition and the Hawks who wanted to secure their heritage. Even amid the promise of joint prosperity, fear lingered. Fear of the unknown, fear of betrayal, and fear that their alliance was built on nothing more than sand. To foster understanding, Scott organized a series of collaborative training exercises between the Oka warriors and human settlers. The idea was simple: to build camaraderie through shared experiences. But traditional practices met modern techniques head-on, igniting sparks that often veered into conflict rather than cooperation. On some days, the atmosphere was electric with excitement, every laugh echoing off the metallic walls of their training grounds. On others, it was filled with palpable tension, as misunderstandings and differences flared up, threatening to fracture the alliance. Alar dedicated herself to bridging these gaps, employing centuries-old Oka rituals to welcome humans into their cultural fold. She invited Scott to partake in the Nuek ceremony, which was a rite of passage expressing gratitude to the spirits of their ancestors. Beneath the starlit canopies, they gathered with other warriors, surrounded by the essence of Earth's nature that was being slowly nurtured in their colony. The scent of roasted wild herbs wafted through the air as drums echoed, resonating with the forgotten rhythms of unity. It was in these moments that Scott felt the power of tradition and the emotional weight it carried within the Oka. Yet, even as bonds were formed, Kell's faction grew increasingly vocal in opposition. During one assembly, his cries rang out above the gathered crowd, entreating the Oka to remember their sacrifices and cautioning against trust in a race they had once viewed purely as adversaries. His rhetoric ignited old fears, shaking the foundation of unity they had fostered. With Scott at the helm of security discussions, tensions escalated, culminating in a public confrontation that left both factions on edge. As Scott and Alar took stock of the tensions, they recognized a looming paradox. The voices of skepticism and rage were often louder than those of understanding and innovation. Kel's compelling speeches cut through the ambient excitement. Each phrase dissected the fabric of trust they had labored hard to cultivate. Whispered doubts began to tarnish their progress, and Scott felt helpless in the face of the resistance that threatened everything they had built. Despite the friction of shared existence, Scott's determination did not waver. He pursued two ambitions simultaneously: to urge the Oka to accept the alliance despite their wounds and to educate his people on the beauty of Oka traditions, hoping it would sow empathy and understanding within their ranks. The two leaders devised a strategy, a cultural exchange program, an endeavor designed to immerse each group in the other's heritage, building bridges through shared experiences while threading a common fabric of identity. During these exchanges, Scott witnessed Oka writing etched into the ancient stones of their sanctuaries, tales of heroism and loss intertwined with their history. He stood in awe as Alar recounted these stories of her lineage. They would sit under the stars, lightning storms flickering distantly as she spoke of the great battles fought for honor, the sacred bonds between kin, and the shared traumas that forged their identity. In moments of laughter and somber reflection, Scott found pieces of himself within the stories, feeling the pulse of universal connectivity thrum through him. Slowly, people began to turn. The whispers of doubt started to fade into the background as Scott sought ways to engage Kel directly. He invited him to witness a simulated mission, an exercise designed to display the effectiveness of a coordinated defense against potential invaders. The demonstration would allow all factions to understand that the survival of their coalition lay in trust and interdependence. While Kel reluctantly accepted the invitation, Scott understood that coaxing him from the fringes would be a monumental task. In the days leading up to the demonstration, nerves ran high. Oka and human warriors trained together, barriers dismantled piece by piece. Scott coordinated training drills that called for collaboration, forcing everyone to confront their biases and fears head-on. As the day grew nearer, they poured every ounce of energy into building a joint defense that would not only simulate their strategies but forge brotherhood in the heat of the moment. When the day of the demonstration dawned, the air lay thick with anticipation. Spectators gathered around makeshift formations, warriors lining up side by side while vibrant banners flapped in the wind. Scott and Alar stood resolute at the platform's forefront, visualizing the consequences of failure. The simulation began with flawless execution but quickly morphed into chaos, unexpected variables thrusting the participants into scenarios of doubt. It was in the turmoil that their unity was tested. If you liked this story based on real events, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to like it. Here you can dive into a different reality every day, where anything can happen. Comment below what kind of story you would like to hear here. Thank you very much for your attention. We are the Sci-Fi family.